All right, I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, October 19th, 2023.
Chair Dennison.
Here.
Vice Chair Pevsner.
Here.
Commissioners Moran,
Here.
Simcock,
Here.
and you, who is excused.
I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
I'll move to make approve the agenda as submitted.
Okay, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next up is approval of the minutes. I see that the first one for approval is August 3rd, 2023. Are there any updates, edits, or corrections as presented?
Not from me.
I don't think we have the people to
We
do
do.
that. Oh, I do not see any. No.
All right, so then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the August 3rd meeting as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
I think I have to abstain because I wasn't here. Is that correct? Yeah, I abstain.
All right, we will skip the August 17th meeting, and next up is the October 5th minutes. Does anybody have any edits, changes, or corrections they'd like to see for the record?
No.
Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to the City Council Liaison Report.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair Tom Dennison. We have nothing to report from Council.
Thank you. All right, next up is public comment. Just a note before we get started here, those of you who are here for public comment, I would like to remind you that agendized item before the commission tonight is the annual review of the conditional use permit for private rental events and filming at the villa. There will be public comment for that specific item on the agenda later in the meeting. That also means that anything to do with the noise created by school kids, the times of which traffic comes and goes for the school, how much building will be done, the placement of vegetation on the property, noise baffling on the property for the kids, and anything not having specifically to do with the agendized item will need to be spoken about now and not later. So we do appreciate your cooperation with that. There will be an annual review of the master plan, and that's coming in May of 2024. Also, please remember that the Planning Commission is not at liberty to ask questions about public comments other than clarifying questions. And because the public comments are not agendized item, we may ask staff to agendize any concerns we have at the end of the meeting, but it's not an interactive session. So with that, at this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. And when addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. And please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes. Waiting for the main event. I like it. All right, with that, we will go ahead and move on. Discussion item number 1, the annual review of conditional use permit 22-03 for private rental events and filming at the villa located at the Alverno Heights Academy campus at 200 North Mitchell Avenue.
I do have a PowerPoint presentation for you, and I have that queued up now. As he stated, this is an annual review of the villa rental event, Villa CUP 2203, which is conditional use permit 2203. And if I turn that on, wanted to go just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing here this evening. I wanted to provide a brief background. Also looking at some of the key provisions of the conditional use permit. Also wanted to touch base on the roles and responsibilities not only on the part of Alverno and the event monitor, but also the city, including the Sierra Madre Police Department and also the Planning Commission's roles. I also wanted to review the annual meeting. We actually had 2 annual meetings that were hosted. The most recent one was on October 5th. And also provide a summary, an overall summary of both the event monitor report and also calls for service for the Sierra Madre Police Department. And then I'll switch out of the PowerPoint presentation and launch the conditions of approval. If you recall, we have 77 conditions of approval. What I was going to do is focus the discussion that relates specifically to the comments that I heard while attending the meeting, along with the city manager, Jose Reynoso, and also Chief Barrientos, our police chief, attended that meeting. And I wanted to focus what I heard, the comments from the community specific to the conditions of approval. So since there are actually 3 commissioners that were not present for the review and approval of the Villa CUP, I did want to provide a brief summary, and that's what this slide is attempting to do. So in May 2010, the City Council approved the TUP process for rental events at the Villa. So it's a temporary use permit, which is a little bit unusual, and we staff we had to approve that annual TUP each year. In July 2021, Alverno submitted an application for a master plan update, and that was largely to accommodate a new lower school, and a public hearing was scheduled before the Planning Commission in November 2021 for the master plan review. And during Planning Commission deliberations, the Commission determined that the conditional use permit process was more appropriate to govern the regulation of special events than the, at the time, current temporary use permit process. And during this same time period, the City Council also directed the Planning Commission to consider amendments to the temporary use permit and commercial photography and motion picture filming ordinances. So there were a number of things going on concurrently. The Villa annual TUP then was also set to expire on August 31st, 2022, and it was staff's desire that the Planning Commission approve amendments to the TUP and filming ordinances prior to the approval of a CUP for private rental events at the Villa. So finally, the Planning Commission did conduct 3 public hearings beginning in July 2022, regulating the private rental events and filming at the Villa as a separate action from the master plan. And the CUP was approved by the Planning Commission on October 6, 2022, which included the following key provisions, which are to host, they could host up to 26 events per year that only could occur on a Friday and Saturday. There is a provision to allow 3 events per month for the month of July and August, and also December. Rental events are limited from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays only, and music has to terminate at 9:30 p.m. Rental events are limited to 200 guests, and an event monitor is required for 100 plus guests. No live bands and no amplifications. There are some exceptions to live music, which is instrumental only for wedding processionals. Noise levels not to exceed 70 decibels. And parking lot lights should shut off, as well as gates close at 10:15 p.m. No idling of equipment or vehicles, and that's largely due to deliveries, truck deliveries. Annual meetings with neighbors, mailing of quarter calendar events to all properties within a 300-foot radius, responsibility by Alverno. And just a distinction, the school events do not count toward the 26 event limit. Same thing for religious events that are permitted on Sundays. They don't count towards the 26 event limit. and the city actually reviews those, and we're using the temporary use permit process to evaluate that information. Roles and responsibilities.
Sorry, I have one question on that. Do you want us to ask now or at the end?
Go ahead.
The 26 events per year with the max 3 events per month, does that mean that the other months are unlimited number of events?
No, they're limited to 2 events per month.
2 events per month.
They're unlimited?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, presumably if it's Friday and Saturday only, it's like 8 events or something.
Yeah, and I think the thought process, I just wanted to validate that, because I think the thought process was if they want to have all their 26 events in 2 months and be
Yeah.
quiet the rest of the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Roles and responsibilities. So Alverno is required to publish a quarterly calendar of events on their webpage. They also have to provide a copy to the city and the neighbors 2 weeks prior to the start of each event. They have to update the calendar and notify the city and the neighbors when updates occur. Include Securitas contact information, who is the event monitor, contracted event monitor. So they have to inform them of any changes to the quarterly calendar. Mail neighborhood event notification within 300-foot radius of the campus property line 2 weeks prior to the start of each event. Host annual neighborhood meetings, and also to submit Sunday temporary use permits forms to the city. And they also have to attend the Planning Commission meeting to review the annual CUP 2203, which is what we're doing here, and we'll review the compliance and conditions of approval. Securitas is a private security company that was selected by the city manager, who provides event monitor services for private rental events held at the villa. And Securitas responsibilities include to confirm relevant contacts with the Sierra Madre Police Department. We wanted to make sure that they actually have the phone number for the watch commander. That was also an issue I'll discuss that came up in at the first annual neighborhood meeting. The event monitor too is also required to review the conditions of approval of the CUP. They also have to sign a statement acknowledging the terms of the CUP, and also utilize a calibrated decibel meter for sound measurements that's provided by Alverno. They also provide parking enforcement, really largely to prevent parking in the neighborhood. They also provide post-event written reports with signatures, and they submit those to Alverno and the city within 1 week following the event. And we do redact sensitive information. Securitas is also required to attend the Planning Commission annual meeting, and they are present this evening. The role of the city manager, director of planning, city manager essentially approves the company providing the event monitor services. Planning director, myself, at my office, we post the link to our Verno calendar of events and the event monitor reports to the city manager transparency portal. We schedule the Planning Commission annual CUP reporting meeting and update event monitor form as necessary. Sierra Madre Police Department, their role is respond to criminal complaints. Code enforcement complaints are directed to Securitas. The SMPD does provide calls for service for private rental events to the city, and as well as Alverno for inclusion in the Planning Commission annual report. They also attend the annual neighborhood meeting. The chief is here this evening, and also the Planning Commission annual review of CP 2203. The Planning Commission's responsibility is to hold annual review to determine compliance with the CUP conditions, and also to hear back feedback from the annual neighborhood meeting. You would also direct staff to administratively amend the event monitor checklist, and also direct staff to schedule a public hearing to consider amendments to any of the conditions for approval of CP 2203 if deemed necessary. And the other option to the Planning Commission is direct staff to schedule a public hearing to consider revocation of the conditional use permit. So the first annual neighborhood meeting was held on July 9th. We had 8 attendees. Some of the comments received included that the event monitor check-in with the Sierra Madre Police Department watch commander. Community wanted to make sure that was occurring. Securitas to confirm cell coverage. That became an issue because some of the event monitors, their phones did not have cell coverage in the area. So they have to make sure that their cell phone is able to take calls locally. There was a comment to include a bar chart of decibel meter readings in the event monitor report. At that meeting, staff as well as neighbors were told that that would not be a possibility. If you recall, CSDA, who is the event or the sound expert, acoustical expert, during the conditional use permit hearings, they were able to provide a bar chart, but again, the level of expertise between what we're using as a handheld sound meter versus the equipment that they were utilizing and technology that they have access to. I'm not sure if Securitas would be able to provide that information. And also, there were comments that it was difficult to navigate the Alverno webpage as well as the city webpage. And there was a comment to make it easier to navigate using cell phones. I believe that both of those issues have been resolved. Music, there were comments that music was not ending at 9:30 p.m. per the CUP, that nighttime event lights and vehicle lights should be shut off at 10:15 p.m. and that there were some complaints that was not occurring. And then Alverno to include grandfathered events ending at 11 p.m. And this is what was occurring is there were a number of events that were under contract prior to the October 6th approval of the CUP. So they are falling under the grandfathered events that allow them to go to 11 p.m. They ask that the calendar be amended to make it more clear which are under the CUP and which are grandfathered events. There was also comments that the traffic and parking management plan was not being adhered to, specific to the alternating use of driveways for entry and exit. So there's a provision in the conditions of approval that alternate the driveways so there is not one street that always has exiting occurring at all the time. So they will be alternated. One street has an exit, one has a different event will have their exit or entrance. And there was also at that meeting a request for a second annual neighborhood meeting, which we held on October. Yes.
One question on that. The grandfathered events?
Yes.
What time was the music to stop for grandfathered events?
I don't recall on that, but the whole event had to be ended at 11. We can ask Alverno if they recall specifically on the grandfathered events. That was under the TUP.
The same time, 9:30.
9:30.
9:30.
Okay.
Are those over?
From 10:30 to 11. The new CUP vendors have till just 10:30.
But are those done now? As of
I
this?
don't believe they are done. Is the question from Chair Pevsner was, have the grandfathered events concluded? I believe there's still more. Yeah, there's 5 more.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding these questions from the commission? So the second meeting held on October 5th. I just want to point out that the review period, reporting period, on October 6, 2022 is when the commission approved the CUP. So it's basically within that whole reporting period. There was, we had 2 attendees at this meeting, and one of the attendees requested to see the contract for the wedding events. Alverno was response that they felt that wasn't under, a neighborhood or really even city purview. Resident unable to determine, again, the same comment, the compliance between grandfathered and post-CUP wedding events. A resident did receive wanted to receive a follow-up phone call from Sierra Madre PD after they had called them. I believe Sierra Madre PD met with them in person in most cases. And a resident stated that the event monitor form is not independently being completed by the event monitor, and that HAA or Alverno is completing the form for them. Certainly Alverno is completing the form for the particular event that's occurring. So what we plan on doing is modifying that event monitor form to say Alverno for office use only, and the rest of it is all reporting by the event monitor. One other thing, we did receive a number of questions, kind of like as you alluded to at the beginning of your kickoff to this event, is that we are receiving a number of issues related to the master plan, even during these annual meetings. The master plan will also have its own annual meeting, as the chair pointed out, in May in 2024. But we're not going to spend much time on, or any time on this, but I did highlight these here on this particular slide regarding student drop-off times, potential for no parking zones, street litter, speeding, and we did have one comment that, again, parking on Alverno's side of the street, but overall the parents have been good neighbors and respectful this year. That was a comment submitted on email. So the next two slides are going to be going over the summary, both for the event monitor reports and Sierra Madre PD. These are my last two slides. Then we can answer some questions from the commission, and then we could bring up the slide for the conditions of approval. So you see here the 12-month reporting period, and I try to limit the reports to this period time frame. There were 17 private rental events. 13 of those were weddings. Securitas did receive one call from a neighborhood or neighbor regarding event noise, and one noise complaint was addressed by the event monitor. So looking at the event monitor reports and also calls for service, it looks like, and there's a summary table that's included in the packet that summarizes all of these topics. But it looks like the neighbors are still calling the Sierra Madre Police Department instead of Alverno or the event monitor who is on site. We did have decibel meter readings, and the overall range of all of those events was 39 to 65 dBA. That's lowest to highest. There was one Sunday religious event with no reportable noise complaints, and also no filming was conducted during the reporting period. And both of those latter 2 points would not be included in these total 26 rental events. In the future, if we do have filming on campus, then I would have our filming staff here to report out specific to any filming activity.
Could I have a question on that? So if the neighbors are calling the Sierra Madre police, what is the protocol in that case regarding noise? Do the police then say, please call the event monitor? Do the police forward things to the event monitor, or does it just go into a black hole and we don't hear
The police
more about it?
report directly to calls. So they send out officers. The officers will monitor the area to see what they hear. Sometimes they might arrive with their own decibel meter. Then they meet with the event monitor, and then they often go back to the call person making the call and brief them as well. Chief Barrientos is also here to provide additional information. I do have his slide coming up.
Okay, and that'll
I'll
be
go
the
through that,
number.
And then we can hear from the chief.
Yeah, so we'll have the number of police calls there were
Yes.
later, okay.
So they responded to 7 calls for service out of the 17 events. There were 11 total neighbor complaints, most of them regarding excessive noise and/or vehicles exiting the Highland or Mitchellinda Gate. There were 2 complaints specific to that, again, in reference to the alternating use of entry or exit gates to not impact one street or the other. Of those 11 complaints, 2 events received 2 calls for service, and 1 event received 3 calls for service. And all of the complaints were addressed by the event monitor. Police responded, looked at decibel meters. It was all within reportable noise within less than 70 decibel meters. So there were no reportable noise violations, but nevertheless, the event monitor did go up to possibly the DJ or whoever is performing the music to lower the volume. All of that was done, even if the meters were less than the maximum allowed. So if you want to ask any questions at this time for these series of slides, myself or the chief, we can do that now before we go into the conditions of approval. If not, I can go straight to the conditions.
I don't have any questions right now, do you?
No.
Okay. Could I get somebody to load that up for me? This one gets a little tricky. It's computers thinking the screen is a second monitor. So you have to physically drag it. Thank you. So, as I said, there are 77 conditions of approval, beginning with general conditions overall. And one of those general conditions is to host an annual meeting. And then eventually that will be presented to the Planning Commission. And again, it basically outlines what the purview of the commission is: to review the film monitor and event monitor reports, discuss noise mitigation measures, and review the need for revisiting any of these conditions. And as I indicated, if the Planning Commission desired to make modifications, then I would schedule a public hearing. We notice accordingly to give us the opportunity to do that. So if you have any comments on General Condition 9. Yes, okay. So this is outlining Alverno's responsibilities. Condition number 11 is the responsibility showing what the Planning Commission shall hold. So in this case, this is what we're doing here. And you could also determine the time frame for these annual meetings. If we feel that they are successful and moving forward, then they can become less frequent in terms of reporting to the Planning Commission. Time of use. This is now not the general conditions, now we're under the planning conditions. In this case, these are the rental events shall only be held on Fridays and Saturdays. They've been complying with that requirement. Again, we saw some of these under my general provisions. The events can't start any earlier than 8 a.m. and they must end no later than 9:30 p.m. No live bands under noise shall be allowed. There's the exception that I alluded to regarding stringed instruments played at wedding ceremonies, which could include microphones for wedding vows, toasts, processional music, and recessional music. Move this down a little bit. No use of microphones. Dancing permitted on the villa and outdoor terrace. But if you recall, all music had to be played indoors, and that meant that if the windows were open, that any speakers had to be directed internally if there was dancing on the villa. There was a comment about generators, that they had to be 150 feet minimum away from and placed from the Alverno campus property line to minimize sound. And also sound dampening measures shall be provided to mitigate event noise, including talking, cheering, and singing. We did receive some complaints that people could hear cheering on, I think, one of the complaints. There was this also 3.6 did address additional artificial sound barriers to provide noise dampening devices, and to be mutually implemented agreeable timetable between the applicant and the property owners and the city. Perhaps we can get an update from Alverno on this particular item. So that's 3.6. 3.7, all events shall be monitored for noise levels. This is the use of the decibel meter, and they shall not exceed 70 dB at any time as measured from the Alverno campus property line. So it's not physically at the villa, it's at property line. And the villa is in a residential area. This also condition of approval, and as people leave the facility, they're encouraged to minimize noise and conversations. We'll still get complaints for that. I've seen a couple. This is condition 5.5, which addresses the traffic and parking management plan, which is designed to minimize impacts to the neighbors by alternating events, entering and exiting per the plan. So not only does the event monitor have these conditions of approval, has to sign an acknowledgement form, both the traffic management plan as well as the sound meter readings where they need to occur. So we have, and they're identified in close proximity at the property line to the villa to get the most precise reading. Those are also identified and given to the event monitor. Nighttime lights, all lights in the parking lot do shut off automatically at 10:15 p.m. Litter and garbage. This is really more of a comment, I believe, related to after school events. But the monitor does that on the following Monday. They do go around all the sides of the campus and make sure that there's no trash, and if there is, it's removed. And 7.2 is we can hear if this is successful that all bottles shall be bagged and not deposited in outdoor trash bins after 10 p.m. Because of the noise during cleanup. On-site event monitor, condition number 8. 8.2, applicant and property owner shall provide the Sierra Madre Police Department with emergency contact phone numbers, both for Alverno staff, including the event monitor for all events, and also provide a telephone contact number. And since then, we have tightened that up to ensure that adequate cell coverage is achieved for the phone being utilized. And I believe that was it. You could see the two exhibits. This one is specific to traffic and parking management plan. I'll go over, it talks about open, closing, entering Wilson Gate, Michelenda Gate. Wilson Gate opens at 8 a.m., closes at 2 and 3 p.m. Michelenda Gate opens at 2, closes by 11 by the guard. Highland Gate. Vendor parking, and they have to enter from Michelenda and exit from Michelenda. And this is that directory map of entry, exit, and there's the Highland access. Then the next exhibit is specific to the event monitor locations for decibel meter readings. There's 4 of them. You see the one on West Grandview and its proximity. Essentially what they're trying to do, here's a parking lot. There's buildings that might block some sound transmissions, but we're trying to get an open reading from each of these points. So you can see from the Grandview, here's the Villa, here's the Wilson reading, Michelenda reading, and then the Highland Avenue reading. And that concludes my review of these conditions of approval. Is there anything you wanted me to go back to, or you have any questions of staff at this point?
I guess I have this question. So nowadays, there's a lot on the market, particularly with people who have Airbnbs for like these continuous noise monitors. You can just like mount them different places. They output bar charts or graphs or whatever. Has that been considered, or could that be considered at those 4 places?
I would like to ask Securitas if they have that capability to have a bar chart that's included in the event monitor report.
I guess this is broader than Securitas, in that like Alverno could put those up if they wanted, because it doesn't require anything extra, and then Securitas could take a little screenshot from it or something.
Yeah. Which their bar chart, which they have, if you can pass around these are all the event monitor reports, so you'll see screenshots of the actual decibel meter reader.
Yeah,
So they are.
I think I did see this. Yeah. I guess it just means that someone doesn't have to like physically go around. You just get it does it continuously. So
Okay.
it's like a smart device.
Yeah, I would assume that could be a possibility. I think that would be more or less a permanent installation
Yeah, yeah.
on a pole at those same locations, and then I guess it would provide.
Apparently, they're $10 a month.
Okay.
So, just
You can-
consideration.
We can always consider that and see if that's a possibility that Alverno would consider installing such a device. We can do further research on that.
I do have a question. Under condition 5, if you have that available, I just want to know if, sorry, 5.1. Oh, wait, Oh, that's parking. Wait. Sorry, if you go up more. It's this 5.
Yeah.
Sorry. Could we have it basically says if we have an alleged violation, you would be meeting with the applicant and property owner to discuss if a violation is found to exist or any violations found to exist. Was if there was any corrective action plans.
So if there were violations or anything that came to the attention of Alverno, such as the cell phone, lack of cell phone coverage, then they would address that, yes.
Okay. Did a permanent solution come about on that cell phone? I just saw it in a lot of the comments
Yeah.
that we received.
And when we had the first meeting, annual meeting in July, that's when it came up, because there were people at that meeting who said they've called, but they were never able to get through. So we made sure that they had an operable cell phone that received adequate cell coverage, and that's what is in place today.
Okay. Is that cell phone so I'm just saying, if I'm a resident, if I'm a neighbor, I'm supposed to call them. Is that number the same every
It's the same.
time?
Yeah.
So that's its designated phone
Yeah.
phone number. I don't have a different Securitas number or something every time. Okay.
I believe that's the case, yes.
Okay.
So was it unclear who was supposed to be filling out the event monitor checklist?
Now there's, basically it's identifying the very beginning of the form is information that really Alverno has to fill out. The event monitor reading is everything thereafter.
So Chair, to clarify, there's the event monitor compliance form, which precedes the checklist. If I'm understanding correctly from the director, it's that event monitor compliance form that was being filled out by Alverno. But Alverno could not fill out the
That-
checklist.
Yes, it's in
That's my understanding.
attachment B in your packet. So what we can do with that form is highlight the area that Alverno is to fill out, so there's no confusion.
I mean, is it the one that's titled Event Monitor Checklist that's supposed to be filled out by the event monitor, that was filled out by Alverno?
No,
The page that precedes that.
It's supposed to be filled out by, so there's the event monitor compliance form.
which is filled out by the event monitor. The date and the event type might also be filled out by Alverno.
Yeah, and that's the redacted part, but then there's the actual one that's titled and was used, the event monitor checklist.
Is filled out by the event monitor.
Okay, I don't think, we might want to get them to comment if that's what actually happened, because
Handwriting looks similar.
it looked identical.
Yes.
Yep.
Should we ask does somebody want to, can one of you step forward from Alverno and help us with this?
So the first 2 pages
Of the, and I'm gonna hold it up, this, I fill out the front page, or if there's another AHA representative there. The second page is the signature of the AHA representative, and then the Securitas representative that shows up, the event monitor guard. Then on the second event monitor checklist, if I have to fill anything out, which would probably be the opening of a gate at 8 a.m. because the event monitor is not there, then I fill that out and initial it, but everything else, the times, page 3 or page 4 and 5, that's from the event monitor themselves. So on some of those, you'll see gate entering and exiting times. I would be the one who opens at 8 a.m. The event monitor is not there yet. And then closing, I am the last one to leave, or the other AHA representative. So you'll see a lot of initials on that section.
So you're saying that the event monitor fills out everything on the event monitor checklist except for some things that you initial. So it should always be clear
Yes.
in that checklist if
Yes.
someone from Alverno has filled it out because
Correct.
it's an initial.
Yes. And I don't know when I started to initial it. I just did it because it made sense to me. So you can see it prior months, but I can't tell you it started in January when this form did, but yes. That was the only portion I would fill out, or the other AHA representative would be the gate time, entrance and exit.
Okay.
Okay?
I think one of those conditions was that Alverno Heights Academy would put the reports up on their website. Is that happening?
Do you want us to start our presentation?
Oh, I didn't know that they had a present. I apologize. Why don't you guys start your presentation and then we'll come back to these questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Chair Dennison, Commissioners, and staff. My name's Ken Farsing. I'm the President, Alverno Heights Academy Board of Trustees. I have tonight with me Joanne Harabedian, who's the head of our school, and you've met Miss Bertolini. She's the facility director. And then William Fuller is here from Securitas. He's the regional manager for Securitas. First, I want to thank the city manager, the police chief, and the director of planning and community preservation for taking time from their busy schedules to attend the 2 neighborhood meetings held at Alverno. Also, thanks to the neighbors who attended both meetings. From the school's perspective, the neighbor meetings were very helpful. We learned from the first meeting in July that we needed to improve our communications with the monitor, the neighbors, and the city. We also learned that there was an understandable confusion between the conditions in the prior temporary use permit and the new conditional use permit, and we're working to resolve these and other issues. Historically, when Alverno has met on the villa, the neighbors have also raised issues related to the school, and we address these issues as well. However, a separate Alverno neighborhood meeting will be held later this year to review the school's conditional use permit, and the chair's already mentioned that the commission will be looking at it in 2024. It's best not to mix these issues for tonight's discussion. Now, we've reviewed the police reports on calls for service to Alverno, and we've prepared an attached analysis. Do you have that? The police department reported 11 calls for service. I'll let Andrea go ahead and pass that out so you can look at the chart. I think it's helpful. Now, we've reviewed the police reports on calls for service to Alverno and prepared an analysis. The police department reported 11 calls for service for 7 events from October 6th, 2022 until October 6th of this year. These calls for service were entered into the Sierra Madre Police Department's CAD system based on the campus address, and it includes both private and school events. For example, one of the calls was for an assembly for Mary's Day at the high school, which was held on a Friday afternoon at 1:30 in the afternoon. So the police department received a noise complaint, but it was related to a school event. Another complaint received was for the school's annual Haunted Villa event. Each year we let the students have a Halloween event at the villa. There was a call related to a neighbor recalling the exiting plan from the prior TUP and not the current conditional use permit where vehicles can exit events on Michelinda. And you can see clearly in that police report that there's some confusion about vehicles exiting on Michelinda. The 4 remaining calls for service on private events are related to noise issues. 2 of these events were held prior to the city approving the event monitor and the event monitoring form. Noise levels at these events were monitored, but no reports were filed since the event monitor and a monitoring form had not yet been approved for use. Noise levels complied with the conditional use permit. Now, there were 2 calls for service made on events where the event monitoring form was in use. In each case, the event monitor reported that noise levels were under or within the levels established in the conditional use permit, and the monitor reported no violations to other operational conditions contained in the permit. Now, the school provided the commission with a summary chart of 17 events held between January and September of 2023, and this was based on the city's approved monitor and the checklist. There were 14 events where there were no complaints to either Alverno, to the event monitor, or to the Sierra Madre Police Department. The April 22nd noise complaint was related to guests waiting for a ride share. Since the gates close at 10:15 p.m., guests that have not been picked up are directed to wait on the Michelinda sidewalk adjacent to the gate. This is the safest area since the Wilson parking lot lights are turned off at 10:15 p.m. Michelinda also has street lights and a bus bench. School staff or the event monitor remain at all times with the guests until their ride share arrives. Guests are cautioned that the school is surrounded by homes and to keep their voices down. The monitor did receive a noise complaint on May 6th where the police department was not contacted. The monitor reported to the neighbor that the noise levels complied with the conditional use permit. However, the monitor instructed the disc jockey to lower the volume. Alverno was asked by the neighbors at the July meeting to host a second neighborhood meeting in October. Alverno agreed to host the second meeting. Since we like to resolve any permit implementation issues with help from the neighbors and the city staff in the meetings. As the staff report states, 2 neighbors attended the meeting. One of the neighbors expressed the concern that it appeared that school staff was completing the event monitoring form. This is not the case, and you've talked about how there's a basic information section of the form that requires school input. However, monitoring sections are the responsibility of the event monitor. My understanding is that the one form that's in question is in pink ink. And Andrea filled her section out in pink ink, and the monitor borrowed the pen to fill out his section with the same pen. So that's a logical explanation for what happened. One of the remaining 4 events with a police report was that school event, the exiting on Michelinda, and then one was related to noise. The noise complaint was at 6:22 p.m. and complied with the noise requirements. We're happy to answer any questions. Again, we have Securitas here. Also, the chief is here if there's questions on the police reports and any police actions. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or have Andrea help.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the gates close at 10:15
Correct.
in your report to us?
On the Wilson, go ahead. Come on,
Actually,
come on.
sorry. Wilson actually closes earlier. It closes approximately around 2:30. Wilson only gets opened up if the caterer, vendor, or myself or the guard leaves at night. The lights are off at 10:15. So there's a typo in that part. Okay, so Wilson gates close earlier. Highland Gate closes a half an hour, 20 minutes to a half an hour before the actual ceremony starts, and it stays closed.
Until?
It stays closed. Yeah.
Okay, so
Doesn't reopen.
what gate is the gate that people exit from?
Michelinda.
Michelinda.
The majority of the guests exit out Michelinda.
And what time does the Michelinda gate close?
Well, the guard leaves at the end, which is 10:30, and then I'm the last one. So within 10 minutes, hopefully, of that time, and I'm the one that fills that out on the gate time.
Yeah, I think you've put 11 in almost every report I reviewed.
Not on most of them, but yes, there are late ones.
There were reports of a mariachi band performing. Was there a mariachi band?
It was a part of the wedding party and procession, and the father was part of it. They played during the processional or recessional part of it, and that was it. After the ceremony ended, it's their part of their cultural ceremony, and it was just on this one. And then there was one prior a year ago during a baptism during the liturgical part. So I'm not sure which one you're referencing.
Well, not one that happened during the liturgical
Okay,
part,
I'm
but
just
is the
saying there-
mariachi band, is that within the constraints of the code?
The conditions allow for stringed instruments during the service, but no live music like a band. No bands.
And the horns.
Yeah, so this one if you're referring to Saturday or the other one?
Talking about a
Which
wedding.
bit? Okay, so then this had a horn and it was stopped.
They stopped it, in other
They
words.
stopped it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll find that, do you know what date that was?
It would have been this last Saturday, because we've only had 2 instances where it happened
Okay,
in the last year.
so we haven't received the report on that yet. We'll
You
receive.
have, yes, it will be loaded up, but we have the part of the written part, which I just showed you, which I think is actually sitting on your desk. That's the written part.
This one?
So the DVR part is not what you have in front of you. The DVR is the one that comes through the actual device Securitas holds.
So, unless I'm missing it on this report that you handed us, there's no mention of the mariachi band.
Not on that one. I mean, I can look at the DVR written one, but that's not the one I put together. This is the one the guard puts together, and I put the first 2 pages.
So where would we be looking for a report of a
I
mariachi
send
band
it
that was stopped?
into Vincent, and he posts it with that.
So it's on the other form, the form from Securitas?
Yes, it gets directly emailed.
What is the date on this event?
It was
Last Saturday.
This is apparently 10/14.
So this is outside of the reporting period. We drafted, or we included a new date, and we had a discussion, should we be doing this as calendar year or stick with October to October?
Yeah,
Which could be confusing. So we put it under this next reporting period.
okay. I think the important part is that we're handed a report that doesn't mention anything about the mariachi band or that it was stopped, and that the noise condition satisfied pursuant to that section says yes, even though it's clearly no. And so I guess that's my bigger concern, is that we're just we don't have accurate forms
Well-
and accurate reports.
Can I see the?
Yeah.
Can I comment on that? If it's part of, our understanding is, if it's part of the ceremonial procession, recession, then that is allowed. The horn was stopped. The horn wasn't even addressed, we didn't know there was gonna even be a horn. And this was a gift because it was actually family members, so it was actually on the spot when it happened. So, yes, so if we need to clear that up, that we're no longer letting it be part of the recessional or processional, it's so rare that it happens, then I wanna make sure that we're clear on that.
I'm sorry, I'm not really understanding. The form clearly says, was there a violation? And it's marked no, but there was clearly a violation because the horn is not allowed. So I'm just trying to understand what we can look to as our source of truth for these reports.
I see what, I was more commenting on if we're not letting it be part of a processional or recessional, then that's what I want clarification
Well,
on
it could-
tonight. Or
Well, there's no clarification needed. It says the only instruments that are allowed are stringed instruments, and a horn is not a stringed instrument. So
Okay, so
I
it's
don't
the
understand
horn.
what the
It's the
clarification
horn.
is.
Okay,
Well, no, I guess the question that he's raising is that, did the event monitor give a report that there was a horn that was used for that processional?
I would have to check the email. I don't know.
So we don't have the copy of the security.
I can look it up from my phone
Okay,
right
I think
now.
we have a rep from Securitas here. Are you able to access that report and see?
Not immediately, I'd have to go, there's basically a website that we go into, it's on site cloud, so I'd have to go there and be able to pull that up, unfortunately.
Okay. And jump in as anybody else has
Are they
questions.
still making their presentation?
No, I think we've completed our presentation. We're happy to answer questions.
I do have a question. It's concerning time. So music ends at 9:30, which means there would still be likely a full crowd at, whoever's there, because that's kind of the end. Yet the takedown of the entire, whatever it is, wedding, chairs, tables from outside vendors should be complete by 10. It just doesn't seem realistic to me that
Yes.
that could happen.
Guests have to leave by 10. Vendors have until 10:30. The rental company, unless there's another school event or something taking place on Sunday, they come back on Monday. But vendors have until 10:30 to clear the property under the current CUP.
But takedown has to stop at 10. That's what the CUP reads.
Correct.
Correct. Vendors, meaning kitchen staff, those kinds of things, loading their cars, they have until 10:30. That is part of the CUP.
Well-
I'm reading 10.
The takedown is 10. So I guess if there's something assembled, that it has to be taken down by 10. Tables would have to be taken down by 10. I guess
I never saw a 10:30. The lights in the parking lot should be off by 10:15.
In Wilson.
The bottles should be done by 10. Do you know where it says 10:30?
It was all
Is it in the traffic management plan?
I don't
all
see
through our
10:30.
planning.
I
That was
just
the
see
only
10.
thing that changed from the original CUP off of that. Because vendors had until 11. And there's actually, that's what changed on that initial 10:30. And that the bottles had to be in bags and no later than 10 PM.
Okay, I can do an actual search for 10:30. Okay, I find one 10:30. Oh, that the planning commission will consider the last item at 10:30 PM. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to make a joke. I was just surprised.
Yeah.
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 All right. So I think that's something that we can get some guidance from staff on.
Because it was in all of our, when we were going back and forth, because that point was brought up, Mr. Simcock, about how do you clean up and everything if the guests leave at 10? And the concern was brought up with the prior planning commission that, you have to get dishes out, you have to be able to get trash out, so that,
Right.
to get out of the house and then lock it up, so that it doesn't stay in the house until Monday. But that was that. That was all of those discussions during the planning commission.
That's fine. But the CUP does say 10 o'clock.
And it was,
So,
the guests leave at 10 o'clock, yes. Vendors have till
no,
10.
including setup and end no later than 10 PM, including takedown.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it says
we-
including takedown.
There's no takedown. There's no breaking down of anything. But there is, guests are leaving at 10. The bride and groom are putting their belongings that they change there in the
Right.
car, mirrors, like that, but not breakdown.
So they're not taking the tables and chairs out?
No.
Sherry, can I clarify this? So here's what I recollect about this conversation the last time around last year. The takedown term, because we were talking about both filming permits and we were talking about special events. And if I remember correctly, the takedown term was all about the filming. And this term may have migrated into the conversation about special events when we were drafting the conditions. Admittedly, it's not here. I do remember the discussion that Ms. Andrea was talking about, but admittedly, it's not reflected here. So this is definitely something we should clarify going forward.
Yeah, because I remember the part of that conversation is too, that I brought up is scullery. The last thing I want to hear after 10 o'clock is the scullery station getting
Right.
Right.
disassembled. So that's why I thought that we did have that 10 o'clock stop. But that's certainly something we can clarify.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just was like emphasizing, just going back to the former topic that I'm seeing in the writing, stringed instruments only, you know. Yeah. Okay, back to this topic.
And so, sorry, I'd asked this earlier before your presentation. Are these getting uploaded to the Alverno website? I think that was one of the CUP.
We have a link that is on our website that goes right there because we can't, for the length of the documents, the file, our website can't fulfill that, can't hold all of that. So we have a link that goes right to the city.
I did use that today.
And
I found, I just Googled, I found the website. I followed the link and it took me right to the city website, because there was some discussion about that in some of the comments. So I checked it and that did work well for me, so.
that came from our July meeting. We made sure that link was direct because it was confusing for the neighbors to find it on the city website and ours as well.
Right.
So we moved some things around and added.
A question I have is part of this is a quarterly notice, and it says applicant and property owner should provide a quarterly notice to all residents within 300 feet. It should describe everything. The quarterly notices should be forwarded to the City Council, Planning Commission, Director of Planning and Community Preservation. I'm not sure if some of that's getting done. I know I've never received a quarterly notice.
So that was a confusion on my part. We said that once everything was online, then that's how we would update it and it would be in real time. After our July meeting, it was moving forward everything, because I was under the impression from all of ours that we were not mailing anything else except for public notice of neighborly meetings, those get mailed, and
Okay.
our email, and also if there's filming things, there's different in that permit.
Right.
So when we discussed it, it was gonna be moving forward, it would be a 3-month, even though not all of our addresses are, and that was discussed at the July meeting.
Right, because you could send something and say,
Well, by the-
June and have a new event added for August.
Right, so
Right.
that's why it was, originally, it was just gonna be
So it's a
on.
live
But yes,
schedule.
So that will be moving forward, and it won't include really any of the past events, it'll just be the 3 months that are ahead.
But it can't guarantee that that's all the events, correct?
And
I
it
mean,
says,
Well-
it says
I'm
even
just
on our
being
website.
realistic.
Yeah, no, and it says on our website, times and dates are subject to change and cancel.
right. But a live, which to me seems better, is available.
Posted on the website.
So that might just be, if we want to keep this in here, I think.
I guess, going back to the document that gets filled out, the event monitor checklist. This is the part that's filled out by Securitas, with the exception of the gates that sometimes get initialed by you. And maybe this is a question for Securitas, I guess they're here. So the site report for 325, again, there's a section that says interaction with SMPD, and it says no interactions with SMPD. And then at the bottom of that, it very clearly says on the report, at 10:34, security made contact with SMPD for noise complaint, but security advised that the party was over code 4. So I'm just curious as to how it is that in one spot we're saying on these reports that nothing happened, and then later we're adding notes that something did happen. I'm just, and I'll give you the background here. We were looking for a place where we could have transparency for the neighbors to see everything that happened here. And it doesn't seem that we're achieving that if we have all these reports that don't reflect what actually happened in the field. So you have any idea how something like that would happen?
And just to clarify, you said this one 3/25, so it's in March?
Yeah, it's listed on the website as 3/25, but it looks like somebody wrote the 3/26 date on, so I couldn't tell you definitively what day the event was.
Chair, is there a copy perhaps we could provide the Securitas rep? It might be up more help.
Yes, it would be in the book. I think that was it, right there.
Also note that 325 police call is noted on the Alverna's report as well.
So do we want to, hand that over to?
And for Securitas, the daily report form, it does have a 24-hour, so one date starts on one and it ends on the other, on the top. It's the daily report.
Yeah, this is the event monitor checklist,
Okay.
and it's written as 3/26 and signed as 3/26, but listed on the city website as 3/25. And yet the police report for that, I'll tell you what that is. It's 3/26 as well, so it must have just been uploaded with an incorrect date.
I can give you a pretty straight and concise answer to that. Even the moment I look at this and I see the name of the person who was actually providing the service that evening, this is someone who some time ago was requested to not be able to return. After we had the meeting in July, it was definitely determined that we had some major training opportunities on our end, myself included, to make sure we had a better understanding of the expectations that we have either for Alverno, but also to the residents that are sitting around the academy. So in this case here, easily someone could, let's say, make that mistake by not paying close enough attention to detail and things of that nature, but those are some of the things that we did bring up after that meeting in July, is just to make sure that our officers are understanding, well, we refer to them as security officers with Securitas, but here it's event monitor. So our monitors understand what they're supposed to be doing A to Z, and making sure, like we're saying here, is paying close attention to detail, because these reports, they are important. They can be used in a court of law, things of that nature. Unfortunately, we have a person like Ernesto Duran here who falls short, and once we determine that that person is not meeting those expectations, then we do pull them out. It's unfortunate, though, that we can't go back necessarily to know where did this person make these types of mistakes, that unfortunately we have to find out 7-8 months later, where we could have cleaned that up much sooner and made sure we done the right thing in the first place. So for sure, post-July, it's been definitely a focus, 1,000%. Anyone that we're sending over that way, really right now we have two primary event monitors, that's Hector Lopez and Emmanuel Castillo, who are coming, and we try to make sure that they're the regulars because they have that operational knowledge, and they're the ones I focused on after that meeting to make sure they understood what they needed to do to not make these same mistakes again.
Except Saturday, where they did the same thing.
Well, I will have to try to see if I can pull up that report. We'll definitely have to get the report to you because.
Well, they fill out, we were told that they fill out the form that we were handed, right? Did you hand back that? We passed it back.
No.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's the form that Alverno provided to us that your officer would have filled out. So,
Yeah. And I wish I could tell you one way or another. I'm not there for this, and if he's making this type of mistake, unfortunately, we work with people. Sometimes there's people make mistakes, and they're never going to be perfect. And we just kind of hopefully just keep working at it progressively, getting them better and better. I mean, really, in this case, if there is information missing from this that should have been there, there's no excuses. Should have been there, and we just have to make sure we're doing better moving forward. I would like to think, for sure, since July, there were a lot more complaints with regard to the performance of our event monitors, and there's a lot of areas where they needed improvement. And I'm hoping, at least to this point, I mean, I'd like to be at 100% with everyone that we're working with, but these are opportunities to continue learning and making sure that we're doing the right thing. So.
Okay.
I did have a question. So I'm noticing the readings are about once an hour. And I'm wondering, do the guests know when those readings are happening? Is that obvious at all to them? It does seem to be like mostly closer to the hour, but it's randomly sometimes happens half way through the hour. And I'm noticing most of the readings seem to be okay, but I also wonder, I do, see people on the road, and if there's a cop there, or if there's a speed camera, they slow down for the speed camera and then they speed right back up. So I could see the possibility if someone knows the noise monitoring is happening and it just happened that they then go crazy. But it seems like that's not a possibility, that the guests would know when the event noise monitoring was happening.
The monitoring is quite a distance from the
Yeah.
house, and so
They wouldn't know.
they wouldn't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and they really,
How do you-
once the music starts, they start monitoring within half an hour is usually, that's when they're supposed to.
When is the prescribed time to take these readings?
As soon as so some weddings or events don't have music during that cocktail hour reception. But if it does start, they'll do a sound reading if they can hear it outside the villa door. And then really it just starts for the dancing portion of it. Now, if there were, I don't even know what, but if something like if there was a loud speech that was going on or things like that, then I do prompt them to go take readings.
Can you speak into the microphone? They're having a hard time hearing you.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
So if they're not playing music during the cocktail hour, then the sound monitor doesn't start. But if it does start, music starts, within a half an hour, they start the readings and continue throughout the night. Oftentimes, though, if that cocktail hour, the music is stopped, there's a good hour and a half, 2 hours, because it's dinner, speeches, and that. There's no loud music. There's no monitoring. But once the dancing portion of it starts, the monitoring is continuous throughout.
But not at some set interval, or it's just kind of, hey, I'm taking a walk now, it feels like a good time, I'm gonna take a reading while I'm there?
No, it's based like, so if it started, if the music started at 7 o'clock, they would start at 7, and then it's within a half an hour to 45 minutes. We used to take it a lot more frequently until the monitor checklist came out. So, but if we feel it's even loud, I always just say, hey, go walk around, take it again. Some of those reports as you see in Vincent's, some of them have a lot of the sound readings and some of them don't. But it's usually directed by me because I'm like, okay, let's go take a sound. Let's go take a check. Usually if a neighbor calls or texts me, they don't do that now after the July meeting, but prior to that, if they did, there would be those extra readings because I would make sure the guard did. I would tell the neighbor that we're instructing them to turn it down no matter what, because even when we're in our sound allotment, we still ask them to turn it down. So.
Yeah, I note that in every time that that the police department was called, there was not a corresponding sound check at that exact time or close to that time, generally not even within like an hour. I also noted that the only 2 times I saw that sound checks were taken after 9:30, they were the highest volume at 1 or 2 locations of the entire recorded sessions. So I'm just curious as to if we're taking a sound reading at 9:33 at the Grandview location on April 22nd, and the only close reading to it was at 6:30 in the evening, and it was the highest of any other reading of the night, and it's after that 9:30 cutoff. I'm curious if we're really achieving our goals.
Well, whatever.
And then I noticed that also with the March 25th one on the Wilson. The highest reading of the entire set of readings was at 9:34. So maybe we need to, well, we'll talk about deliberation in a minute, but.
Also, we do, when the police comes up, most of the time they ask for the decimal then too. and the officer does do that. So yes, there is a time that passes in between for sure.
Yeah, so
But-
another instance of something being recorded but then not putting onto the form.
Well, when it's recorded, it's captured from the DVR. But in the spaces, if that's what you're referring to, the one they fill in, is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm saying,
Oh.
you just said, if I understood you correctly, that when when PD makes contact, that they will take a sound reading and tell PD that we're within constraints.
No,
How do they determine if they're
they
within constraints
take
at that time?
sound readings within the first 20 to 30 minutes when music starts.
And that's it?
And they go throughout the event.
I think the question is when the officers come up,
Mhm.
do they, with Securitas, with the event monitor, do they look at the monitor and then write it, the decibel level on their police report, or?
I don't know if the police write it down on
It's
their
not on the police report. I
report.
checked the
I
police
think
reports.
they just, when I've been present, they're just physically eyes on reading the device.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Because and they're usually closer. They're by the front door or the lawn.
And we do have the police chief if you wanted further clarification.
I do have a question about the decibel reading. Securitas does that, so I think it's probably best for you. Can you explain the steps they do in the reading? I mean, I know I see that they have a meter. Are they taking literally a snapshot in time, or is it over, say, a minute? You know, because sound is every time I'm talking, it's loud. Every time I'm not talking, it's not loud. And music is the same way. So I'm just curious what that level is. I'm not sure, you know, if we're taking basically a picture of the sound at a location twice or three times during an event, does that, does it really show the event? I mean,
Right.
it's just
Is
taking.
is there a procedure that says,
Yeah, so
don't stand with your back to it and face away?
Right.
Face this,
I'm
face
just
the, like,
curious about
what are the
that.
procedures that,
Yeah.
Yeah, once again, I'll give you a nice, concise answer to that. So like you're saying, you know, definitely sound's going to go in waves, right? So really, if anything right now, it is more so a snapshot in time. They're going to those locations. They'll put up the reader, make sure it, you know, stabilizes once it's got that number, and then they're going to take a picture that goes into their report. Then they'll move along to the next location and do that periodically throughout the shift.
Okay. No, and I think that's, with that method, that's about all that they can do.
Right.
So, okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
I think those are. Did you have a question? Go ahead.
No.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yep.
For Alverno stuff, I just want to confirm that we both have the same understanding with respect to the grandfathered agreements. It was my interpretation that with respect to the grandfathered agreements, all the conditions mentioned in this conditional use permit apply except for those expressly contracted for that are contrary to, like, for example, the time. But everything else in this conditional use permit still applies. Is that also how you've been
Yeah.
enforcing? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and maybe it was in your report, I was trying to listen to you and not be a bad listener and look at the report, so I'm trying to piece this together. it would be great if we could review these in advance instead of at the dais next time.
Which report are you referring to?
The one that got handed out to us tonight about your explanation of the police reports?
Yeah. We did provide it, we basically worked off of the police reports and the staff report.
Yeah.
We also provided a chart to the commission, which was part of your package, which analyzed all the events between January and October of this year. So it is basically data pulled directly from those reports. I mean, you do have the chief here if the chief wants to talk about those.
So on the, sorry, I'm trying to toggle between the reports from the city website and the police reports. On the 422 police report, which is page 51, clearly that indicates that there was interaction with the police department, and on the site, or on the event monitor checklist, there is no mention at all of any contact with PD. So I'm just trying to piece together when PD receives a call at 10 after 10 for screaming, whistling, loud music. I mean, that would have been 40 minutes after the cutoff for music. So I'm just curious as to how it is that we're still seeing complaints about loud music 40 minutes after the music allegedly ended. Any ideas on that?
Go ahead.
When they came,
Go ahead.
there wasn't, excuse me, I have the police reports. If you tell me the date, I can show Ken and Securitas, but.
Sure, it's page 51 of the agenda packet. It's 230422 is the CAT event number.
All I have is the police reports by date, if you want
He's looking up here, that's
Yeah,
the
okay.
CAD, that's the CAD.
April 22nd is
So,
the
a
date.
couple of times, the Uber and all of those things, those were after, yes, the police got the complaint that there was music and things. When the police got up there, they walked around, they talked to the event monitor. They saw that it was only a couple people packing up and the people waiting for the Uber. I'm just talking about that. I don't know if this was that specific date, because Ken's looking for that date.
He's right here. This is the one, the Uber one.
Yeah, so you'll see under the comments, and the chief can certainly come correct me when I say something out of order here, but I believe the comments are the description of what it is that the call came through for, and so you'll see that it's screaming, whistling, wedding at location, loud music. And if you look at the date and time, that I believe is the call time when the call came in of 22:11. So that is 41 minutes after the music stopped. So I find it interesting that 41 minutes after the music stopped, we're continuing to hear complaints about loud
So I
music.
think it was related to the people that were waiting for the Uber.
So they were listening to music while waiting for the Uber?
They were not. They were just standing there. There was 4 of them. They whistled.
Again, because someone says there was screaming and music doesn't mean there necessarily was.
That's true. Doesn't mean there necessarily wasn't either.
Right.
That's true.
And that's why that's why it's so challenging when we don't have accurate reports of any kind to really go off of. And I'm not saying that the police report is not accurate. That's not what I'm saying. I have full faith in the police report. What I'm saying is, when we have a series of forms that we can't rely on the data on, it's really hard to draw any kind of conclusions. It's like we've lost a year of reporting on this.
So on this particular, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you wanna come on? On this particular date, on this was actually before, I actually had to pull this up and talk about it with Ken. On the back of the sheet, I put 4 people waiting for Uber. There was whistling. They were instructed to be quiet, to wait there, reminded them about the neighborhood, and that also the police did come and show up, check that there was nothing in violation. They saw the people still waiting there for an Uber. They toured the grounds. So I personally make hand notes on everything because I know what I have to answer and I know what people have a personal opinion about me. So I make sure I try and keep as many copious notes as I possibly can throughout the evening. Sometimes I have to actually email them to the board of directors and head of school, even the prior head of school, when it is confrontational conversations with neighbors and things like that. So I try and document everything. And the only other thing I can say is that after that last entry is made, whether it's handwritten or DVR, and different guards do it different ways, sometimes they've already left that paper in its spot in the cafeteria, and then they're walking up, and then they're making that last DVR entry, or vice versa. But now, since July, their last, like I'm walking off property, there's a phone call being made to Watch Commander. So, I mean, that's the steps that they're trying to make consistent. And I try and make sure that if it is a different guard, which thankfully, not that we don't have to keep improving, that they follow all of those little things. So sometimes you'll see notes of 10, 15 lights off, just different things I can try and do so that it becomes more routine.
I mean, this report shows that basically the officer was dispatched basically at 22:12, and it took about 5 minutes to get there, good response time. But during that 5-minute period, perhaps at that point, Alverno's controlled the situation, so the people aren't making noise anymore. So then the officer was there for 3 minutes and cleared it.
Yeah, and then got another call.
Where's the other call?
Second caller said the screaming woke her up. That call came in at 22:22 after the officer cleared.
But, yeah, again, I'm just looking at the report, so.
Yeah, I'm looking at the same report. If you
Yeah.
look back up in the comments section,
Right, second caller said screaming woke her up, but she didn't say when. Right? Who knows? Who knows what, when the screaming was going on? So, I mean, your point about you're not questioning the police reports. The officers do the best they can with the information that they have. Same with the dispatcher. Sometimes they're getting sketchy information. They don't get all the details. They don't ask what time or find out what time or what happened. So, again, this could be, the police reports could be improved, but that's officer training and that's up to the chief. So,
Well, I
that's,
don't have a problem with the police
I don't think
reports.
that I would impugn the integrity of the training of the police department here. That's probably not the road you want to go down.
what's that?
No, I just said, I don't think that that's what you intended to mean.
All right, I think those are my questions. Anybody else have any more questions?
Not for this part, no. I have questions for staff.
Okay. Questions like about events or like when we should start deliberating questions?
I guess I have one
Not for
question. So
events.
what is the motivation of Alverno for having these events? Is it outreach to the community? Normally, schools don't necessarily have weddings or filmings, so I was just wondering the kind of motivation for why to have this
The,
sort of
the,
thing.
the
around.
conditional use permit was for the adaptive reuse of the villa, and that's the grounds that it was granted on. The villa is a very expensive facility to try to keep up, so I think the planning commission recognized that and basically allowed a certain number of events and also filming. the filming itself was reduced in the amount that we could have. So, there was compromise on all different sides.
So it's financial, you're making money, which helps with the upkeep of the villa essentially and the school's operation.
Well, we understand the benefits of the villa to the community. Sierra Madre values its historic structures, and to try to provide some revenue to help us maintain the villa. Yeah.
Are we gonna let, I had a couple questions for the chief, since so much of this stuff revolves around, I think this is the proper time, yeah. I mean, generally.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Chief, thanks.
Thanks for coming. Just generally, since so much has been talked about the interaction between the Securitas and police officers and all that kind of stuff, can you just, you can editorialize as to what the procedure is and what your view of what has gone on? Just, I'd like your opinion most.
Absolutely. So I became involved during our first meeting in July in regards to this matter. Obviously, I was sworn in February, so I got invited to the first meeting. So a plan was implemented during that meeting. Some concerns were raised by the citizens. I believe in our last meeting that we had October 5th, some of them have been remedied, and there were some issues with, or some questions in regards to the website, some parking issues, so on and so forth. That's it. The plan that was implemented was, there was some issue with the cell phone coverage. So what we implemented is for the Securitas, the monitor, to call the station at every event. And what the monitor provides is, we're having an event, what the event is about, meaning wedding, baptism, a party, etc. They provide the phone number, the generic phone number, and so that we could assure that we could get a hold of them. They also provide their personal cell phone to the station. In addition to that, Andrea calls the station, also notifies us of the event, and also we have her phone number in our records, provides us with that phone number. What we do when we respond to every single call, so I'll give you an example. I mean, just to give you, if you look at our CAT events, so anytime a call is generated, we respond to any issues of concern, whether it be a fight, an alarm, etc. So as of May 26th, I believe, of this year, until now, we had not had any calls whatsoever in regards, it is true, ma'am. I'm sorry, it is true. When I run an analysis, just to give you an idea, I do not run just Alverno. I run the whole perimeter, okay, is what I do. Okay, and when I check the perimeter of the area, I look at those. If we have a party, hypothetically on Highland, and at a residence that's unrelated to Alverno, it has nothing to do with Alverno. Then I look at those that are related to Alverno. So I can tell you that in the last year to date, we've had 50 calls at Alverno, all for alarms, extra patrols, some of the 11 incidents, just to give you an idea, okay? So we respond to the calls. So I'll give you an example. The last call since our meeting was this Saturday. The officers got a call. I believe it was Janice that called. She called. The officers, before going to her residence, met with the monitor at Highland and Michelinda. The monitor had his decibel meter. In addition to that, it was at 65. And just so you know, our contact with some of our citizens and with the monitor are all tape recorded. They're all digital recorded. So I went through all the audio this morning for this meeting, okay? So it read at 65, okay? Soon after that, they met with the reporting party. made contact. About 7 minutes after the call, the same person, Miss Janice, calls and says, I believe they've elevated the noise. The officer responds there, and it's now at 50-some decibels. And I want you to know, the officers were smart enough not to use not only the reading by the monitor, they had their own digital, their phone, and they had a portable one from the station. And that read at 50-some, and it's all on recording.
And the Security, I mean, there's somebody else monitoring it that they show up, there's someone from Securitas there?
Yes, they meet, both times they met with the monitor for Securitas. Securitas? Okay, I can't pronounce that, but they met both times with them, and Andrea the second time.
Right, so what I'm getting is, they show up a couple minutes after the phone call, they say, hey, what was it when the person called and said, hey, I think it's louder? They can kind of go, okay, they can give you a reading of what that was, not just when they show up. You know what I mean? Because they can show up, and by the time they show up, it's gone down to 56 and maybe.
So I'll give you an example. When they showed up the first time, they showed up, it was at 65, unbeknownst to them. They were unaware that somebody had called.
Right.
You hear the officer ask the monitor if they can lower the music. You get full cooperation, absolutely not a problem. They lowered it.
Okay.
7 minutes later, officers are back there again because there's a second call, and now it's at 50-some decibels.
Okay.
So they did lower the music. Now, could they have elevated it for a couple minutes? Absolutely. I mean, we're not there for the 7 minutes. However, our second go-around, it was at 50-some decibels.
Okay, thank you.
Just to give you an idea.
I do, I get it, thank you.
And then we had another call. Those were the only two calls. A whole lot of neighbors did not call. It was one other person that called, and that's because there was a noise of an alarm coming from, and that's when we met the third time with with Andrea, and asked if an alarm was going off. That was the nature of the call. It wasn't the music. They called in regards to the alarm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission on this specific agendized item. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. And I think we have some comment cards to lead off with.
Janet Savoy, West Point.
I need a moment to compose myself. May I defer to somebody else to come back? Thank you.
Paul Savoy, what? Lisa Puleo, West Highland.
Hi, good evening. Lisa Puleo, 672 West Highland. My first item is that the CUP was signed in October of 2022, and Alverno is saying that there are 5 events to come that are grandfathered, which means that those events were booked over a year ago. In fact, if some of those events are over the next 3 months, it's a year and a half that these weddings were booked. That's absolutely shocking to me. People don't usually book weddings a year and a half in advance, and I'm just not buying the 5 grandfathered events. We talk about Alverno's transparency. If they knew these weddings were booked a year to a year and a half ago, why can't they put it on a calendar? So when I have guests at my house, I'll know that there's a wedding, and I'll change my event, so I don't need to deal with the embarrassment of these weddings. Second, Alverno and Securitas knew that we couldn't get a hold of them, and when we did call, it said, voicemail not set up. We told Alverno, we told Securitas in a July neighbor meeting. This situation wasn't remedied for 3 months. And yes, I understand that there were glitches. It's difficult. But we're expecting Veritas to take care of it. Veritas means truth, sorry. Securitas to take care of us. They can't just say we need to do better. They can't just say that there was a problem with this employee. We're relying on them to take care of us as residents so we don't have to deal with this noise. Next, neighbors recorded noise at 80, even 90 decibels. Our readings and our machines are more sophisticated than Alverno. The disparity is just too wide. So I don't know what they're doing, but when we hear loud noises, we record the sound. And we're getting 80 and 90. We're not getting 50, 60, 70. It's not happening during these weddings. Alverno has admitted that, number one, they have no control over their wedding goers. They had no control over someone playing an instrument. So how can we expect them to monitor these events if they're saying they have no control? They've admitted that they have blatantly broken the CUP 2 times. I believe that warrants a public hearing to review or revoke the Alverno CUP. Sorry, this isn't easy. Alverno is spending so much time and energy on these rental events that make money for them so they can do whatever. Why don't they spend the time and the energy educating our children? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristen Stevens. I'm exhausted. I was not going to speak, but there were a couple issues with getting in our logs of reports and complaints, and we have I don't know who I tell, but we have a screenshot saying that it was delayed and we don't know if it ever went in. I have a picture of who was outside screaming. Actually, we personally didn't see the screamers, but we were very concerned when this young woman started screaming. And we went out and everybody started texting. So I'm one of the people that just because we did the appeal, they think we have some in, which we don't. But we do get a lot of emails, texts, calls from neighbors. Well, who do I call? Can't you tell them? People don't want to talk to Alverno because there's been a lot of issues and we're getting dismissed by certain things. We were not calling because of the appeal going on, but we did log an awfully lot of complaints or situations. We'd like to know where's the portal, because frankly, there's times where it's not really a call to be made to the police department. There's a bus idling, it was idling for a long time, but I'm making dinner, I'm smelling diesel, whatever, and then finally, we walk over, which we shouldn't have to walk over, but maybe we'll just put it in the portal and say, hey, let's get better about that. I think everybody's forgetting, and I was reminded at a August city council meeting on noise, and it was really good, because I hate coming to these meetings, but I have to say I've learned some things and I like it too. Somebody mentioned that, yes, you can take a reading and you can just take it at a particular time. Our reader will just record. I recorded one event up to 20 minutes, but it's only like a 2-minute, 1-minute reading you need to get for some of these violations. I hope you got our noise readings. We spent a lot of time typing out what was going on and the levels and what was happening. You didn't get our noise readings? We had about 10 of them in there. Okay, so it has a graph. We have to go to the computer, download it, and then I had to go through and just delineate to make sure you understood that's at 70. At the city council meeting, it was brought up that it isn't just about decibels, and taking a reading at the property line of Alverno is stupid, because you're going to get a different reading than if you're at my property line. I have 50 feet, I don't know, they have 150 feet. So why is it they're getting yet again another, privilege? Why is it they are not having to follow the Sierra Madre noise code and you record 25 feet from the source and it should be no more than 80 decibels? what is up with this at the property line? It makes no sense. And then for one, I've seen the guy, or a guy, because we have a porch. We definitely don't want to sit there and watch him, but it does face the school. He sits outside his car with the noise meter, and I'm telling you, that is not the right way to do it. It is work, too. And I will give the Veritas, Caritas, whatever their name is, it's work to get in the car, go drive around, and I've watched the guy. He takes his reading. Sometimes it's down by the wall. That's not appropriate either. But he takes his
Thank you, Ms.
reading,
Stevens.
then he takes a picture of himself. This goes on and on. We need the portal. That was discussed, and we'd really like to have it. And I'd like to know how we're still supposed to get these through the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Okay. I also have the picture of the people.
Okay, my name is Janice Savoy. I live at 713 West Montecito. I'm sorry if I'm not looking at you. This is going to be much more difficult than I thought it was going to be, because I was coming to ask you to amend the event checklist to basically make it neutral and take it out of Alverno's hands completely, so that we got accurate information to really know if this conditional use permit was working. And then as I sat there, I heard our chief of police malign me for calling the police department on Saturday, when I spoke to officers outside my house who did say, boy, we can hear every single thing, you're right. We need transparency here. What I'm asking is one of the conditions you have is to make direct staff to amend it. I would ask that you amend it in such a way that it goes directly from the security guard to the city portal. That it does not go on the cafeteria table, that it does not pass through Alverno's hands, because we need to really know what's happening. I would also ask that the security guards be better trained. When you put up there that there was only one Securitas call, I know I've personally made 3. I've spoken to Emmanuel twice. He's very nice on the phone, but he doesn't even ask who I am. I have to remind him, you need to take my name. This is a neighbor contact. Do you need my number? What information do you need from me? And always what I'm told is, I will talk to the Alverno person. The decibel reading is fine, ma'am. I'll talk to the Alverno person. That's not independence, and that's not what we were expecting. As I sat through all these hearings last year, I think the main thing everybody wanted was an independent source of information so that we could accurately see if the CUP was working. We don't know if it's working because it's not independent information. And I'm sorry if I'm a little emotional, but I really feel like I can't go to the event monitor, and now I feel like I can't go to the police either. So I guess I just live with the noise, and I don't say anything anymore, which means that's not fair to me as a resident, as a tax-paying resident. I should have some recourse here. And a clear event monitor situation, I know my time is almost up, that does not go through Alverno hands might make it more fair to everybody. So that in a year from now, we're looking at more accurate reports, and you guys can make a more informed decision. I'm not asking you to revoke the permit. I don't think that's fair. I'm not even asking you to reopen it. I'm asking you to make the reporting what the intention was. Thank you for your time, and I apologize for my emotion.
Thank you, Ms. Savoy.
I'm sorry.
I said thank you.
Paul Savoy, West Montecito Avenue.
Good evening, members of the commission and staff. My name is Paul Savoy, live at 713 West Montecito. And, just a couple of issues because, and again, I can't speak to decibel levels or anything like that. All that I know is that oftentimes, we hear the music quite a bit at our home on West Montecito. So we're kind of further away from Alverno. And very often we hear the ancillary noise. We can tell you the names of the happy couple every time because we can clearly hear what the DJ is saying. And we often hear the yelling and applause and all of that stuff that goes on. And that they certainly have a right to do that at those sorts of events. Hopefully it is very celebratory. But earlier, you made reference when you were going through all of the conditions to 3.6, and that dealt with sound dampening measures that were designed to reduce the amount of noise, from the hooping and hollering and the speaking and all of that kind of stuff. And it would be interesting for me to know, have any of those measures been actually taken place? Because, the secondary noise we hear so distinctly down where we are that it seems hard to imagine that, secondary measures that protect that sound dampening measures are actually being utilized for this process. So that would be an interesting piece of information to know. And and I wasn't planning on making this comment, but in reference to Commissioner Moran's question regarding kind of the financial use of the public events and the filming and all that stuff at the villa, I think that certainly doing the preservation on the villa is a very valid thing, and it probably is very costly. It's an old structure. I'm pretty sure it's had many decades of deferred maintenance. But honestly, that can't be the only reason why they conduct these events. I mean, if you look at an independent website like GuideStar, it's very clear that they're not just using the money to fix up the villa, maintain the condition of the villa, but maybe to pay off Alverno's outstanding debt. So I think that there's multiple uses that money goes to, and that's probably neither here nor there, but I just wanted to respond to that query from Commissioner Moran. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
East Stevens, West Grandview, north of Alverno. Two things I wanted to bring up. We were talking about closing time, and during the last year's meeting, the term taillights was brought up as defined as the closing time. Taillights means all you see are taillights going down the hill. Everything else is closed. And from all of our recollections of that meeting, taillights was at 10, maybe 10:15 at the July meeting. We brought this up, and Andrea told us that no, it was 10:30 or beyond. And so again, that's something that I think is incorrect, because I remember leaving the meeting last year thinking, well, one thing that we got was taillights at a decent hour. And I remember I think it was Councilmember Parkhurst, City Council, when we were talking about it there, that he said that he had been at a wedding at a nice venue, and when closing time came, they literally took his plate out from under his fork and said, "Party's over, we're done," and didn't understand why Alverno needed, or the villa needed, so many exceptions or extensions past, a half an hour past the music stops. It's a planned thing. The other thing is regarding the trumpet music. My wife and I heard this Saturday in our home. We walked the entire perimeter of Alverno taking sound readings, and the trumpet music was playing the entire time that we walked that distance. And so that was one tired bride, because that was a long processional. But again, just we're having severe trust issues just because we say black, they say white, you say white. And we just have no central points to agree on. But anyway, thank you.
Any other comments from anybody? All right, then I will turn it back to the commission for deliberation. So I guess we have a couple of options before us, I think that we can, I mean, this was a discussion point, so, Mr. City Attorney, what are our options before us?
Thank you for the question. In the staff report, there are recommendations, and I'm flipping to the staff report now. So the options before you are to set a new date for another annual hearing. B, directing staff to administratively amend the event monitor checklist, and I assume that also includes the first 2 pages. C, direct staff to schedule a public hearing to consider amendments or a revocation of conditional use permit 2203. I lumped 3 and 4 together because it's really, if that hearing happens, you'll have the authority to do one of 2 things.
Okay. Who would like to start? Anybody?
Well, I'll just make some brief comments so we can throw this around, because I'm not sure I have a concise list of what I'd like to see happen. I mean, I think obviously we need another hearing to consider some of the amendments. I think the problem is we have a black and white situation where it's a he said, she said. I see all the acrimony and all the letters. It's more extensive than people have come up to the podium. And no doubt there's been mistakes with the monitoring system and whatnot, but I think we could make some minor adjustments. I don't know that it rises to the level of having a hearing to revoke the conditional use permit itself, but I think there's just cause to make some serious restrictions, and that's the kind of thing I think we should probably discuss in more detail. I mean, I have some thoughts on it, but that's my overall, I mean, just in terms of what this hearing is about, that we should probably schedule something like that, with the idea of maybe putting tighter controls on it, getting some feedback from Securitas about their capabilities, and so that we can, get some more trust with the community that the monitoring is going to be done, and some of the things were suggested that might be reasonable. And I think we're kind of hearing all the same thing, because rather than try and dissect all the complaints and satisfy those, I don't think we're ever going to get that. I think, some of the complaints are valid. I think some of them are probably exaggerated, but I think it goes both ways. So I think we need to find some fairness going forward, so that, because I don't think there's a basis really, from what I've heard, to revoke the permit. But I think there's some serious changes we can make. So that noise reduction, maybe times, reducing the times, the taillight issue, some of that stuff I think will go a long way, and then better monitoring.
Yeah, I think I don't agree with a few of the things in the permit personally. I was not here obviously a year ago. I'm not sure how the 70 decibels at the street came about. I don't know where that came from. It's not part of any of our noise code. I did look at our noise code. Daytime exceptions is, on Saturdays and Fridays, occurs until 9 p.m.
Commissioner Simcock,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify.
Sure.
The noise ordinance has been amended, so I don't know if you're looking at.
Oh, maybe
And
I-
it hasn't been.
No, it hasn't been amended.
Those provisions were not amended?
The city council discussed the item, and they postponed adoption of an ordinance to give time for the Natural Resources Commission to investigate further one of the topics in the ordinance, which is specific to gardening equipment.
Right.
Okay, so is that going to affect, or I don't know if I can ask even, 93260, which is the special exemption provisions for daytime exemptions, that has the
No, it's
80
70.
decibels at 25 feet.
The proposed ordinance will mimic what's presented in the CUP at 70 dBA
At street.
at the street. With the exception, while the ordinance has not been adopted, but I believe it says from 25 feet from property line.
I would just, I think we should, whatever, if that's going to change, we should maybe try and make
Right.
this.
I think the CUP is actually written such that if that changes, that it conforms.
Right, yeah, they would be parallel.
If it's the lesser of.
The more stringent standard would control.
Right. I don't know if any of us could answer if 80 decibels at 25 feet or 70 decibels at the perimeter of this property, which is more.
We had sound experts give us guidance on that when we looked at that
Okay.
as a zoning change.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it wasn't part of the zoning code, was it?
Or not the,
It was included as part of the update to the zoning code. It just has not been adopted by city council, approved by city council.
But the noise ordinance portion, I believe, isn't in the zoning code,
It's not in
right?
the zoning code,
Yeah,
it's in chapter, I believe, 5,
that's right.
Title 5.
somehow it had come
The planning commission, or the city council directed the planning commission
to give,
to review the ordinance, provide a recommendation, even though it was out of their purview, because they felt with all the discussions and the expert testimony that you would be the best to render a recommendation.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so whatever happens with that, we'll work on that, but I think that obviously says I would not like to finish anything tonight.
yeah, this is just a discussion, so it wouldn't be finishing. I guess
Okay.
what we have to make a decision on is, are we going to just set a date for the next one of these? Are we going to direct staff to administratively amend the event monitor checklist? Or do we want to have a public hearing to consider amendments up to and including revocation? Those are two separate items, obviously, but consider amendments to it. And so I personally, I think that, and I was here when we went through this process, and I said, I don't think I missed a single one of those meetings. The intent of adding a 1-year period was so that we could do exactly what we're talking about doing, which was to revisit this and say, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. This is what is clear, this is what is not clear. We should change this. So I think that this was absolutely the outcome, at least I expected. I don't know about yourself, but what I expected to happen was that we would have a year's worth of results, that we can now have a better standing from which to make changes and better conform what the CUP is. So I personally think that we should have a public hearing to consider amendments to the conditional use permit. Is that something that's agreeable to the other commissioners?
Yeah, that's.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. That was the alternative that seemed the most appealing. And I think that it'll be also clearer with more time what those particular amendments might be, and hopefully we'll have more information as well. The other comment I wanted to make is I feel like having the threshold of were the police called is a very high threshold. Personally, unless like someone is trying to stab me, I'm never going to call the police because there's a lot of implications for your neighbors, for other people. So, this idea or these thoughts of having other ways of communicating, where on the spectrum are we from, a minor complaint to something really major, without using, okay, was there a police call or not? Based on all the emails that we got and other things, it seemed like there were a variety of complaints on the spectrum, including many people who may be like me, who just are not the type of person who's going to call the police. but it could have been, 90 decibels, whereas there's someone else who maybe they have migraines or something like that, and, at 50 decibels already, they're feeling it. And it really is kind of more of a health and safety issue for them. So I would like, when we consider amendments, to consider ways of collecting more data other than just angry emails over, the course of a year that build up, and then considering them a year later, so that perhaps Alverno can make course corrections along the way. And us next year, the data that we have on a presentation isn't, you had 11 police calls and 2 of them were on the legitimate side, and 9 of them were not, or something like that. It would be more like there were 150 things registered as issues, and 20 of these were related to noise and 15 were related to trucks, and whatever. More data on that would be interesting to me. But in summary, the public hearing to consider amendments is definitely the option that I prefer.
So then, I guess, staff, how best to proceed down this road? I think that there are probably recommendations from staff that would be worthy to consider. I think that firming up some of the language where we all thought was really black and taillight, and now it's not as clear as we remembered it. So obviously some of those recommendations, I think that we probably all have some recommendations too. Should we have an initial public hearing that allows staff to provide us with their thoughts, and in the interim we can consider what we might want to bring forth there, so that it's at least two meetings to consider it, or how best to proceed?
As a discussion item or a public hearing for the next one?
So Chair, let me state some other options here. Another option could be, because a public hearing requires the 10-day notice, and there's going to be expenses involved in that. You could continue this meeting, have a discussion. We can introduce potential amendments, and then based on that discussion, then schedule a potential hearing after that. That's just another option available to you.
Right. Then we can come back with those amendments already made for your consideration.
Yeah.
The other thing that was interesting and I think warrants further investigation is what Commissioner Moran suggested about having a fixed decibel meter at the various locations around the campus, that when activated, they can leave it on during the entirety of the event.
Yeah, I think continuous monitoring is great, being validated by the Securitas person walking around, so that if there's a disagreement between the two readings simultaneously, then we know that one of them's out of calibration, that the methodology of one of them's not working. I mean, I think having that double check's a great idea.
Yeah, and one of my general comments was I'd like more feedback from them to see and have them, because they're gonna be the ones basically providing that or enforcing it. And I'd like to somewhat take it out of the hands of the police department, so they're not called as much, and so we can have some transparency, which is what the neighbors want. And maybe some way of monitoring that so it's independent. So if there's some complaints about things going through people's hands, we'll have more objective data. So the only other thing we'll have to get from that is the loud noise from something else that is unrelated. Someone tearing down the street that has nothing to do with the party. But at least we'll have the information. But I'd like Securitas to sound in on that, because they're the ones doing most of the monitoring. So maybe they can help us formulate a reasonable way to do that.
And I think some better direction on how frequent the timing readings are taking. I mean, if we switch to a continuous monitoring, then that goes away. But 2 readings out of all of those events were after 9:30. I mean, that seems like a really easy way to say, hey, we're doing a great job. We took all these readings at 9:35 and 9:40, and they were the lowest of the night. Here we are doing a great job. right? That would have been a great opportunity that may have been missed here. But figuring out how we get accurate reporting, 'cause it doesn't matter if we put a bunch of reports up there if we know that we don't have faith in them. So I guess what we're really looking for then, and I'm sorry, let me ask one more question before we do that. Should we, if we have other suggestions before this, and maybe we want to not do it at our next meeting, but the meeting after, just so we have, or I guess that would be, shoot, is that the first meeting in December?
No, we have 2 additional meetings, so the one thereafter would be November 16th. We had a couple of internal items, but we can certainly move that if necessary. I'm just wondering if the November 16th is going to be enough time to gather information or.
And that's why I was asking. I want to make sure we have enough time.
And that, looking at the schedule, the next meeting would be December 7th. And then after that, it puts us into next year.
I think that there is a sense of urgency in the community to restart the clock with new guidelines. And so I would love to target no later than that December 7th meeting.
Okay.
Is that reasonable? Do you think that gives you enough time?
I'm going to have to collaborate with Alverno and PD and Securitas to see what we can come up with. I'd like to investigate the fixed sound meter method. I think that sounds most promising in terms of transparency regarding, having the event monitor report left with Alverno. It's certainly easy enough for the event monitor to turn that material into Securitas. They PDF it, they send it to staff. We upload it to the portal.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we should get recommendations on all of that. And I think I had another one that I wanted to bring up, but it's escaping me now. At any rate, oh yes, it was it's been 15 or 16 months, so an update on those fixed sound baffling that was discussed in the CUP that I'm gonna guess, since we didn't hear anything about, hasn't happened. But a report on that as well. So I guess we can go ahead and schedule it for December 7th, and then if it needs to get continued from there, we can do that.
It's a discussion item, so we don't have to push
Oh,
it to a
great.
date certain. I would just put it back on the agenda.
Okay, so we'll tentatively target December 7th if we can't produce, we don't want to waste anybody's time. I want to have thoughtful responses to this that actually help us move forward, so I would rather get the right research in. So we do not need to continue it to a date certain?
So, Chair, it would be a motion to continue the item.
Thank you. I would love to see a motion to continue this item.
I'll make a motion, we continue the item to December 7th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Next on our list is Planning and Community Preservation Department reports. Director Gonzalez.
And I think you might have missed the commission reports as well, but I
Oh.
can go first.
Oh, it's not on the agenda, that's why I missed it.
Oh, okay. So that was an oversight. And if you had any reports?
Does anybody have anything to report?
No.
This is for our next meeting, November 2nd. I have nothing to report. I'll be here.
If we're going to be absent for a meeting, is this the appropriate time to report it? Okay, I have two reports then. One, I will need to miss the next meeting. I'm traveling for business, and then I will be out. You said there's only one meeting in December?
Yes.
I will be out the December 7th meeting as well.
I will likely be out for the December 7th meeting, but I can, if we set it up, I can attend by phone, correct?
Yes, you may attend remotely so long as we have a quorum present. So we would still need a quorum physically present.
Which we won't be able to do the Alverno then.
And we won't be able to do it because we have a commissioner that is conflicted out.
Yeah, and I'm a hard conflict. I will probably give birth on the 5th.
Oh.
Well, I guess we answered that question about when we're going to hear about this again. Okay.
Oh, my goodness.
So Commissioner, you will also be out? Okay.
Anything that has to do with this hearing, Commissioner, you will be out.
He has a conflict. Okay. Understood. I should be at January meetings, or if there's anything in November that we could do, but I understand the consideration that we want to have
Right.
time.
I should be here for both November meetings.
Okay. Great.
So we'll attempt to try to find a schedule that's going to work for everyone.
Thank you. All right, Planning and Community Preservation Department reports.
So we do have a meeting on November 2nd, so in a couple of weeks. We are reviewing an addition, so we're going back to that. And we also have a tentatively scheduled a discussion regarding amendments to the conditions of a tentative track map for Stonegate specific to Lot 18, specific to the McComber cabin. So I'll just go ahead and brief you of the concept is to relocate the McComber cabin to adjacent to the Richardson House and Lizzie's Trail End to create an enclave of more of the historical nature of each of those buildings as museum pieces. So during deliberations with the property owner, CETT, they've agreed to finance some aspect of that. Could be even rebuilding the McComber cabin on one of their vacant lots at Stonegate, and then pay for relocation for placement on a permanent foundation and adjacent to Mount Wilson Trail Park.
The director left out my favorite part, which is he wants to call it Heritage Square. I thought that was a good.
Harrington?
Isn't there already? Isn't there already?
In Heritage Square and Highland Park, I believe.
Right as you're driving down the 110, right?
I don't know.
It's Turtle Park anyway, so.
Yeah, that's right. It's Turtle Park. That's right.
Oh, man, they're gonna be
All right.
really, people are gonna really be confused about where these buildings were really located at one time if we stick them all.
Both the Richardson House, Lizzie's Trail End were different locations, and I think it's an opportunity even for the city to have a collection of their historical buildings in one location.
It would
So
go.
if we can make this happen, we'll go through the process, through the Planning Commission has some actions to take, and the City Council as well.
So it'd be east of what's there right now.
Yes.
Plaque with your name on it. That's the director who started it.
I don't know, that barn's pretty big. I wanna see where they're gonna put
Yeah,
it.
the barn will stay.
Barn-
barn-
yeah, the barn's
will
got to
be
stay.
adapted
Oh, the
for
cabin.
use.
Oh, the
It's just that smaller cabin,
Oh,
and the original portion of that smaller cabin.
okay.
We do also have a meeting on the 16th of November. And what we were looking, information coming from our city attorney for a legislative update. And possible, did you want to discuss what your concept is for at this point?
Yeah, so I was thinking at some point to have a commissioner training. I don't know if that the best time is is it the beginning of the year, or is it maybe in July when the new commissioners assume office. But basically, it would be a hypothetical scenario with a lot of different planning issues. And so you're forced, and we would be the staff would be the directors, and you all would be the ones to try to figure out what is going on, what's the mistake, what's the problem, to get an idea of, to basically issue spot and to get an idea of you know, what you need to be on the lookout for.
And that would be like,
Yeah,
local.
it'd be a noticed meeting, and it would be a training.
Because all of us are there.
We
there.
have to be
It
there,
has to be
right,
noticed.
right,
Yeah.
right.
But we have Commissioner Moran and Commissioner Simcock out on the 7th, so maybe that's not the ideal time for this.
I think this is a great idea.
I do too.
It sounded like the 7th agenda would have been packed anyway, but yeah, I think it's an excellent idea.
Okay, that's concludes my report.
Thank you. I guess if there's nothing else, then we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.